A melody from 23 years ago, sung softly in a darkened nursery, was all it took to bring a millionaire to his knees. When Marcus Hastings heard his new maid singing that specific lullaby to his inconsolable infant daughter, the color drained from his face and his hands began to shake uncontrollably. It wasn't just any song. It was a lullaby only one person in the world knew, a woman he had promised to love forever, a woman whose death he had caused, and whose memory he had spent over 2 decades trying to bury. Why would this stranger, this quiet maid from nowhere, know the one song that could unlock the darkest chapter of his life? The answer would unravel everything he had built and force him to face a truth more devastating than he ever imagined. The Hastings estate sat perched on 15 acres of manicured grounds in the exclusive enclave of Riverside Heights, where old money whispered and new money shouted. The main house was a sprawling Mediterranean revival mansion with cream-colored stucco walls, terracotta roof tiles, and arched windows that overlooked rolling lawns dotted with ancient oak trees. A circular driveway of imported Italian stone swept past fountains that ran day and night, their water features designed by the same architect who had worked on the Bellagio. Marcus Hastings had built his fortune by transforming struggling neighborhoods into luxury properties, a talent that had made him beloved by investors and despised by the communities he displaced. His company, Hastings Development Group, had raised historic districts and working-class neighborhoods across 3 states, replacing them with glass towers and exclusive condominiums that only the wealthy could afford. At 47, he was worth an estimated $240 million, a figure that grew by millions each quarter. His home reflected his success with an almost aggressive precision. Every piece of furniture was designer, every painting an original, every surface polished to a mirror shine. The West Wing housed his private office, a cathedral of glass and steel where he conducted business with the ruthless efficiency of a general planning a campaign. The East Wing had been designed as a family sanctuary, with a nursery suite that had cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Everything in Marcus's world was controlled, calculated, and perfectly ordered. Everything except his 6-month-old daughter, Lily Rose Hastings. The baby had been born on a cold March evening, arriving 3 weeks early in a delivery that had gone catastrophically wrong. Her mother, Catherine Hastings, had been Marcus's wife of 8 years, an elegant socialite from a prominent Boston family, the perfect accessory to his rising empire. The marriage had been more strategic than passionate, a union of ambition and social standing rather than love. Catherine had hemorrhaged during delivery. Despite the best trauma surgeons money could summon, she had died on the operating table while Marcus stood helplessly in the hallway, his perfectly tailored suit splattered with her blood. The baby had survived, a tiny, red-faced creature that the nurses placed in his arms while he was still in shock. He had named her Lily Rose after Catherine's grandmother, a woman he had never met but whose approval Catherine had always sought. It seemed like the right thing to do. But from the moment Lily came home to the estate, she had cried. Not the normal fussing of infants, but deep, inconsolable wailing that seemed to come from some bottomless well of grief. The pediatricians found nothing wrong. Her lungs were strong, her reflexes perfect, her development on track. The specialists prescribed white noise machines, specialized formulas, weighted blankets, and a dozen other interventions. Nothing worked. Marcus hired the best nannies money could find. The first was a stern British woman with 40 years of experience who lasted 5 days before declaring the situation beyond her expertise. The second was a gentle Filipina grandmother who tried every traditional remedy she knew and left in tears after 2 weeks. The third, fourth, and fifth barely made it through their trial periods. The crying was relentless. It echoed through the mansion's halls, bounced off the vaulted ceilings, and invaded every corner of Marcus's carefully controlled world. He found himself working later, staying at his downtown office until midnight, doing anything to avoid coming home to the sound of his daughter's misery. His business partners noticed the dark circles under his eyes. His assistant began fielding calls from concerned board members. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, a pragmatic woman who had worked for the family for 12 years, finally pulled him aside one morning in early October. "Mr. Hastings," she said, her normally reserved demeanor cracking with concern. "You need help. Real help. This baby needs something none of us can give her. Marcus had snapped at her, told her he was handling it, that he didn't need advice from the staff. But that night, after another screaming session that lasted from sunset to dawn, he called the most expensive domestic staffing agency in the city. "I don't care what it costs," he told them, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "I need someone who can make my daughter stop crying. Someone who can handle this." The agency promised to send their best candidate by the end of the week. The arrival of Rosa Morales. Rosa Elena Morales arrived on a gray Thursday morning in mid-October, when the first autumn winds were stripping the oak trees of their leaves and the sky hung low and heavy with the promise of rain. She stepped out of a taxi at the estate's service entrance, carrying a single worn leather suitcase that looked like it had traveled 1,000 miles. Mrs. Chen met her at the door and led her through the service hallways to the staff quarters, a converted carriage house behind the main mansion that had been renovated into comfortable but modest living spaces for the household employees. Rosa's room was small but clean, with a single window overlooking the gardens, a narrow bed with crisp white linens, and a dresser that had seen better days. "Mr. Hastings expects professionalism and discretion," Mrs. Chen explained as she showed Rosa around. "The baby is your primary responsibility. Everything else is handled by other staff. You'll work the night shift primarily, as that's when Lily is most difficult." Rosa nodded quietly, her dark eyes taking in everything with a careful, measured gaze. She was 42 years old, though her face carried the kind of weariness that made her look older in certain lights. Her hands were work-worn, the nails short and practical, the skin weathered from years of service. She wore her black hair pulled back in a simple bun, and her clothing was neat but inexpensive, dark slacks and a plain cotton blouse that spoke of someone who had learned to be invisible. "I understand," Rosa said softly. Her voice had a slight accent, the musical lilt of someone who had grown up speaking Spanish at home. "I've cared for difficult babies before. I'll do my best." Mrs. Chen studied her for a moment, and something in Rosa's quiet demeanor seemed to satisfy her. The other nannies couldn't handle it. "Mr. Hastings is frustrated. Don't take it personally if he's short with you. He's under a great deal of stress." "Of course," Rosa replied, and there was something in her tone, a sadness, perhaps, or a resignation, that made Mrs. Chen pause. "Is everything all right, Ms. Morales?" "Yes," Rosa said quickly, offering a small, professional smile. "I'm just grateful for the opportunity. When can I meet Lily?" The baby was in the nursery on the second floor of the main house, a room that had been designed with every luxury imaginable. The walls were painted a soft sage green, decorated with hand-painted murals of woodland creatures. A custom crib made of sustainable cherry wood sat beneath a mobile of crystal stars that caught the light and scattered rainbows across the ceiling. Shelves lined with books and toys stood ready for a childhood that had barely begun. And in that beautiful, perfect room, Lily Rose Hastings screamed. The day nurse, a exhausted-looking woman named Patricia, was pacing with the baby, bouncing her gently and making soothing sounds that had no effect whatsoever. Lily's face was red, her tiny fists clenched, her whole body rigid with distress. "She's been like this for 2 hours, Patricia said, her voice tight with frustration. "I've tried everything. Bottle, diaper change, burping, rocking. Nothing works. It never works." Rosa approached slowly, her movements calm and unhurried. She held out her arms. "May I?" Patricia practically thrust the baby at her, relief flooding her face. "Good luck. I need a break before I lose my mind." She fled the room, leaving Rosa alone with the screaming infant. Rosa held Lily against her chest, feeling the baby's frantic heartbeat, the desperate rage in her tiny body. She walked to the rocking chair by the window and sat down, positioning Lily so that the baby's ear was against her heart. And then, very softly, Rosa began to sing. "Duerme, mi amor, bajo las estrellas." The melody was old, passed down through generations. The words were a mixture of Spanish and English, a hybrid created by a grandmother who had wanted her grandchildren to remember both languages, both worlds. "Close your eyes, my darling, sleep until the morning light. Rosa's voice was gentle but strong, the tune simple but hauntingly beautiful. She rocked slowly, her movements matching the rhythm of the song. Los Angeles Tea Garden, mi pequeña bella. Lily's screaming began to taper. The rigid tension in her small body started to ease. Dream of gardens where the world is always right. By the time Rosa reached the second verse, Lily's cries had reduced to hiccuping sobs. By the third verse, the baby's eyes were drooping. And by the fourth, Lily Rose Hastings was asleep, her tiny face finally peaceful, her breathing deep and even. Rosa continued singing, even after the baby had settled, repeating the lullaby 3 more times to be sure. Then she simply sat, holding the sleeping child, staring out the window at the gray October sky. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She had sung this same song 23 years ago to a different baby, one who had never taken a breath, one who had died with her sister in a fire that had consumed everything. Rosa closed her eyes and let herself remember, just for a moment, the sister she had lost and the promise she had made at a graveside so long ago. The night Marcus heard the song. For the first 3 days after Rosa arrived, Marcus barely noticed her. He was consumed with a major development deal in Portland that was threatening to collapse, spending 16-hour days at his office downtown, coming home only to sleep and shower. Mrs. Chen reported that the new nanny seemed to be working out well, that Lily was calmer, and Marcus filed that information away without much thought. Success. Problem solved. Move on. It wasn't until the 4th night that everything changed. Marcus had returned home at 11 p.m. after a brutal negotiation session with city planners who were threatening to block his rezoning permits. He was exhausted, angry, and desperately craving a scotch in silence. He poured himself 3 fingers of 18-year-old Macallan in his study, loosened his tie, and was about to collapse into his leather chair when he heard it. Crying. Lily's wails cut through the mansion's quiet like a knife. Marcus closed his eyes and felt the familiar wave of helpless frustration wash over him. So the new nanny wasn't a miracle worker after all. Nothing had really changed. He drained his scotch in one burning gulp and headed upstairs, ready to tell Rosa to do her job or find the door. As he climbed the curved staircase to the 2nd floor, his footsteps heavy on the marble steps, the crying began to subside. And then he heard something else. Singing. Marcus froze on the landing, his hand gripping the banister so hard his knuckles turned white. The voice was female, soft but clear, drifting from the nursery. And the song was impossible. Duerme, mi amor, bajo las estrellas. Marcus's vision blurred. The hallway seemed to tilt and spin around him. His heart began to hammer against his ribs with a force that made his chest ache. Close your eyes, my darling, sleep until the morning light. He knew this song. He had heard it hundreds of times, 23 years ago, hummed by a girl with paint-stained fingers and dreams bigger than her circumstances would allow. Los Angeles Tea Garden, mi pequeña bella. Isabel Morales. The art student he had dated for 18 months during his junior and senior years at Coastal University. The girl who had loved him with a fierce, unguarded passion that had both thrilled and terrified him. The girl who had told him she was pregnant during finals week of his senior year, when he had been 3 months away from starting his MBA program at Stanford. The girl he had abandoned. Dream of gardens where the world is always right. Marcus stumbled forward, his legs moving on instinct rather than conscious thought. The nursery door was slightly ajar, and through the gap he could see the rocking chair by the window. Rosa sat there, silhouetted against the soft glow of the nightlight, holding Lily against her chest and singing that impossible, haunting melody. Lily was quiet, her breathing deep and even, already asleep. But Rosa continued singing, her voice carrying that same tender, almost mournful quality that Isabel's had possessed when she was sad or scared or lost in memory. Marcus's hand shot out to steady himself against the doorframe. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. The scotch he had just consumed roiled in his stomach, threatening to come back up. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. Isabel had sung this song constantly. She had told him it was the only lullaby she knew, taught to her by her grandmother when she was small. She had said she would sing it to their baby one day, had hummed it while touching her barely their belly during the brief 2 weeks between telling him about the pregnancy and him ending their relationship. He had broken up with her in a coffee shop 3 blocks from campus. He had been cold, calculating, cruel. He had told her he wasn't ready to be a father, that he had plans that didn't include a child or a struggling artist girlfriend. He had implied she should handle it, his exact words, ones that still echoed in his nightmares, and then he had walked away. 2 weeks later, Isabel was dead. An apartment fire, ruled accidental. Faulty wiring in the old building where she lived. She had been 3 months pregnant. He hadn't gone to the funeral. He had told himself it was too painful, that his presence would be inappropriate, that he needed to move forward with his life. But the truth was simpler and uglier. He had been relieved. The problem had solved itself. He could go to Stanford unburdened, could build his empire without the weight of responsibility dragging him down. He had buried the guilt under layers of ambition, success, and carefully constructed lies. He had married Catherine 8 years ago partly because she represented everything Isabel hadn't been: connected, cultured, content to be an accessory rather than a person with her own dreams. And now, 23 years later, in his own home, a stranger was singing Isabel's song to his daughter. Marcus pulled back from the doorway, his heart racing so fast he thought he might be having a heart attack. He retreated down the hallway to his bedroom suite, closed the door, and stood there in the dark, shaking. His hands fumbled for his phone. He pulled up the employment file the agency had sent over when they placed Rosa. He read it again, this time actually seeing the details he had glossed over before. Name: Rosa Elena Morales. Age: 42. Place of birth: Santa Cruz, California. Previous employment: various private households, Newport Beach, Sacramento, Portland. Education: high school diploma. Family: none listed. Emergency contact: none listed. Morales. The same last name. Marcus did the math with trembling fingers. Isabel had been 19 when she died, 23 years ago. If she had been alive today, she would be 42. The same age as Rosa. He pulled up Google on his phone and typed, Isabel Morales Santa Cruz Fire 2002. The search results loaded slowly, each second in agony. And then, there it was. A scanned newspaper article from the Santa Cruz Sentinel, dated June 21, 2002. Local student dies in apartment fire. Santa Cruz: Isabel Morales, 19, a junior art student at Coastal University, died early Sunday morning in a fire that destroyed her apartment building on Maple Street. Firefighters responded to the blaze at 3:47 a.m. but were unable to save Ms. Morales, who was trapped on the second floor. Fire investigators believe the cause was faulty electrical wiring in the building's aging infrastructure. The landlord is under investigation for multiple code violations. Ms. Morales was known among her peers as a talented painter and sculptor with a bright future ahead of her. Friends say she had recently learned she was expecting her first child. She is survived by her mother, Carmen Morales, and her younger sister, Rosa Elena Morales, 19, both of Santa Cruz. A memorial fund has been established in her name through the Coastal University Art Department. Marcus read the article 3 times, each word burning into his brain like acid. Her younger sister, Rosa Elena Morales, 19. Rosa wasn't just someone who happened to know the song. Rosa was Isabel's sister. And she was here, in his house, caring for his daughter. The phone slipped from his trembling hands and clattered onto the hardwood floor. Marcus sank onto the edge of his bed, his head in his hands, his carefully controlled world crumbling around him. This wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Rosa knew exactly who he was. She had come here with a purpose. But what? Revenge? Justice? Blackmail? Or something even more terrifying, the truth? Marcus sat there in the dark for hours, unable to move, unable to think clearly, while down the hall Rosa Morales rocked his daughter and sang the lullaby that had once been meant for a baby who never lived. The watching begins. Sleep was impossible. Marcus lay in his bed until dawn, staring at the ceiling, his mind churning through possibilities and scenarios. By the time the first gray light filtered through his windows, he had made a decision. He needed to know what Rosa wanted, and he needed to know if she truly understood who he was. He would watch her. Carefully. Discreetly. And he would wait for her to make her move. Over the next several days, Marcus became a ghost in his own home, appearing at odd hours, observing Rosa from doorways and corners, listening to conversations she had with other staff members. He found himself unable to focus on work, delegating urgent decisions to his executives and canceling important meetings. His assistant, Jennifer, a sharp woman in her 30s who had worked for him for 6 years, called him out on it during a phone briefing about the Portland deal. "Marcus, I've never seen you this distracted," she said bluntly. "What's going on? Is it the baby?" "It's nothing," he lied. "Just tired. This parenting thing is harder than closing a $50 million development deal. Maybe you should take some time off. Real time. Not just working from home." "I'm fine, Jennifer. Just get me the revised zoning reports by Friday." But he wasn't fine. He was unraveling. He noticed things about Rosa that he had missed before. The way she would pause in front of the family photographs in the main hallway, her eyes lingering on the formal portrait of him in his study. The way she carefully avoided being alone with him, always making sure Mrs. Chen or another staff member was nearby when they had to interact. The way she held Lily with a tenderness that seemed to go beyond professional care, almost as if she were holding something precious that had been lost and miraculously found. And every night, without fail, Rosa sang that lullaby. Marcus began recording it on his phone, standing outside the nursery door in the darkness, capturing that haunting melody. He would play it back later in his study, the sound of Rosa's voice mingling with his memories of Isabel's until he couldn't tell them apart anymore. He started leaving tests, small psychological traps to see if Rosa would take the bait. He left an old photograph on his desk in the study, a casual shot from a college party where Isabel could be seen in the background, laughing with a group of art students. When Marcus checked later that day, the photo had been moved slightly, rotated a few degrees, as if someone had picked it up to look more closely. He played music from the late 90s and early 2000s on the house sound system, bands Isabel had loved. Radiohead, The Smashing Pumpkins, Jeff Buckley. He watched Rosa's face tighten with recognition when Hallelujah drifted through the kitchen where she was preparing Lily's bottles. He brought up Santa Cruz in casual conversation with Mrs. Chen while Rosa was within earshot, mentioning that he had gone to school near there. Rosa's hands had frozen mid-motion, her back stiffening, but she said nothing. She knew. She absolutely knew who he was. But she remained silent, going about her duties with quiet efficiency, transforming Lily from a constantly screaming infant into a relatively peaceful baby. The change was remarkable. Under Rosa's care, Lily actually smiled, actually cooed, actually seemed like a normal, healthy child. Marcus found himself feeling grateful and resentful in equal measure. This woman who was probably here to destroy him was the only person who could give his daughter peace. The irony was not lost on him. The anonymous message. 2 weeks after Rosa arrived, Marcus received an email at 3:17 a.m. He was still awake, sitting in his darkened study with a glass of scotch, listening to a recording of Rosa singing the lullaby for perhaps the 100th time. The email notification chimed on his laptop. The sender was listed as Truth, Bearer Point 2025 at protonmail.com, an anonymous encrypted address. The subject line was blank. Marcus's hand shook as he clicked it open. There was no message. Just an attachment. A PDF file titled memorial_1.pdf. He downloaded it, his heart hammering. The file opened to reveal a scanned newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, from the Santa Cruz Sentinel dated June 26, 2002. It was a longer article than the one he had found in his earlier search, a follow-up piece about Isabel's memorial service. Community mourns loss of talented young artist. The article continued with quotes from Isabel's professors, friends, and family. And there, in the third paragraph, someone had highlighted a section in digital red ink. Isabel's younger sister, Rosa, 19, read a poem during the service, her voice breaking with grief. My sister was going to be a mother, Rosa told mourners. She was so excited, so scared, so in love with the baby she was carrying. She would have been an amazing mother. Someone took that future from her, and I will never forget. I will never stop asking why. The highlighted section ended there, but the article continued. Also mentioned during the service was the father of Isabel's unborn child, though he did not attend. Several of Isabel's friends expressed anger that he had abandoned her shortly before her death. He walked away when she needed him most, said one classmate who asked not to be named. Isabel was heartbroken. She died heartbroken and alone, and he never even said he was sorry. Marcus stared at the screen, the words blurring through tears he hadn't realized were falling. He clicked out of the PDF, but another email had already arrived from the same anonymous sender. This one had a subject line, "The Fire Report." Marcus opened it with trembling hands. It was a scanned official fire investigation report from the Santa Cruz Fire Department. Page after page of technical details about burn patterns, electrical systems, and structural damage. Marcus skimmed through it until he reached a section that had been highlighted. Investigators note, while the official cause has been ruled as accidental due to faulty wiring, several anomalies were noted during the investigation. The building's electrical panel showed signs of recent tampering, and witness reports indicate that Ms. Morales had complained to her landlord about flickering lights and burning smells in the days before the fire. The landlord, Richard Voss, could not be reached for comment and fled the jurisdiction before a full investigation could be completed. Criminal negligence charges were recommended but never pursued due to lack of evidence and the departure of the primary suspect. Another email arrived. This one contained a single scanned photograph. It showed Isabel in her apartment, sitting on a threadbare couch with paint supplies scattered around her, holding her barely visible pregnant belly and smiling at the camera. The date stamp in the corner read June 2, 2002, just 3 weeks before her death. She looked radiant. Terrified. Hopeful. Below the photograph, someone had typed a single line. She was going to name the baby Sophia if it was a girl. She never got the chance to tell you that. Marcus's chest constricted. He couldn't breathe. The study walls seemed to be closing in around him, the air thick and suffocating. Another email. This one with no attachment, just a message. Rosa Elena Morales came to work for you for a reason, Marcus Hastings. She is not here for money. She is not here for revenge. She is here because she made a promise to her sister 23 years ago, and she always keeps her promises. You will know what that promise was soon enough. The question is, what will you do when you find out? Marcus slammed his laptop shut and stood up so violently that his chair toppled backward. He paced his study like a caged animal, his hands fisting in his hair, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Someone knew everything. Someone was watching, manipulating, orchestrating this entire situation. Was it Rosa? Was it someone working with Rosa? Was it some stranger who had uncovered his past and was toying with him? And what was this promise Rosa had made? What did she want from him? Marcus grabbed his phone and pulled up Rosa's employment file again. He dialed the staffing agency that had sent her. "This is Marcus Hastings," he said when someone answered. "I need complete background information on Rosa Morales. Everything. Her previous employment, references, work history. I want to know everywhere she's worked for the past 20 years. The agency coordinator put him on hold, then came back with the information. As she read through Rosa's employment history, a pattern began to emerge that made Marcus's blood run cold. Rosa had worked for 7 different families over the past 23 years. Every single one had been in cities where Hastings Development Group had major projects. Newport Beach, where he had built his first luxury condo tower. Sacramento, where he had demolished a historic neighborhood for a shopping complex. Portland, where his current project was underway. She had been following him. For over 2 decades, Rosa had been tracking his movements, working in the shadows of his success, getting closer and closer. And now she was in his home, caring for his daughter, singing the lullaby that should have been sung to his first child. The ghost of Isabel Morales had finally caught up with him. And her sister was about to make him pay for everything he had taken. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. The anonymous emails had shattered whatever fragile denial he'd been clinging to, and by the time dawn broke over Riverside Heights, he had made a decision. He needed to confront Rosa directly, needed to know what she wanted, what her endgame was. He found her in the garden behind the estate at 7 in the morning. She was pushing Lily in an expensive designer stroller along the stone pathways that wound through meticulously maintained flower beds. The October air was crisp and cool, and Lily was bundled in a soft pink blanket, cooing contentedly at the morning light filtering through the oak trees. Rosa saw him approaching and her body tensed almost imperceptibly. She stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Hastings," she said quietly. "You're up early." Marcus stopped a few feet away from her, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his cashmere robe. He looked exhausted, haunted, a far cry from the commanding figure who usually strode through his empire with absolute confidence. "We need to talk," he said, his voice rough from sleeplessness. Rosa's dark eyes met his steadily. "About what, sir?" "Don't." The word came out sharper than he intended. "Don't play games with me, Rosa. Or should I say, Rosa Elena Morales. Younger sister of Isabel Morales." The name hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Rosa's hands tightened on the stroller handle, her knuckles going white, but her face remained calm. "So you know," she said simply. "I know that you're Isabel's sister. I know that you've been following my career for 23 years, working in every city where I had major projects. I know that you came here with a purpose." His voice cracked slightly. "What I don't know is what you want from me." Rosa looked down at Lily, who was starting to fuss slightly, sensing the tension in the air. She began rocking the stroller gently, her movements automatic, soothing. "What do I want?" she repeated, her voice soft but carrying an edge of something, pain, anger, grief, Marcus couldn't tell. "That's a complicated question, Mr. Hastings. Try me." Rosa was silent for a long moment, her gaze still on the baby. When she finally spoke, her words were measured, deliberate. "I was 19 when my sister died. I was supposed to be staying with her that night, but I had gone home to visit our mother in Santa Cruz. Isabel called me around midnight. She was scared. She said the lights in her apartment kept flickering, that she smelled something burning in the walls. She wanted me to come get her, but I told her to wait until morning, that it was probably nothing." Rosa's voice remained steady, but Marcus could see tears beginning to gather in her eyes. The fire started at 3:47 a.m. By the time the fire department arrived, the entire second floor was engulfed. They found Isabel in her bedroom. She had tried to get out through the window, but the smoke. Rosa paused, swallowing hard. The coroner said she died of smoke inhalation before the flames reached her. They said she didn't suffer. I never believed them. Marcus felt sick. "Rosa, I'm not finished." Her voice was quiet but firm. "At the funeral, I stood at her grave and I made a promise. I promised Isabel that I would find out what happened to her baby's father. The man who abandoned her when she was pregnant and terrified. The man she had loved with everything she had. The man who broke her heart so completely that our mother said she never saw Isabel smile again after he left." She finally looked up at Marcus, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. "I promised I would find you, Marcus Hastings. Or Adrian Price, as you were known then. Yes, I know you changed your name. I know everything about you. It took me 3 years to track you down after you disappeared. You were good at covering your tracks. New name, new city, new identity. But I found you." Marcus's legs felt weak. "Why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you confront me years ago?" "Because I needed to understand you first," Rosa said. I needed to know what kind of man builds an empire on the ashes of the people he's destroyed. I worked in your buildings, Mr. Hastings. I cleaned the homes of the families who bought your luxury condos. I watched you demolish neighborhoods where working people lived, where children played, where communities existed for generations. And I saw the same pattern over and over. You take what you want, and you never look back at what you leave behind. That's business, Marcus said weakly. That's just how development works. Is it? Rosa's voice was sharp now. Is it just business when a 70-year-old woman loses the home she's lived in for 50 years because you want to build a parking garage? Is it just business when families are displaced, when communities are torn apart, when people's lives are disrupted so you can add another zero to your net worth? Marcus had no answer. He had heard these arguments before from protesters, from activists, from people he dismissed as obstacles to progress. But hearing them from Rosa, from Isabel's sister, they hit differently. I watched you for 23 years, Rosa continued, her voice dropping back to that quiet, measured tone. I watched you become richer and richer, more and more successful, while my mother worked 2 jobs until arthritis crippled her hands. While I cleaned other people's homes and raised other people's children because I never had the chance to have my own. While Isabel's memory faded from everyone's mind except mine and our mother's. What do you want from me? Marcus asked again, his voice barely a whisper. Money? Is that what this is about? Because I can. I don't want your money. Rosa's voice was cold. I want you to feel what my sister felt. I want you to understand what it's like to love something so much that losing it would destroy you. I want you to know fear and vulnerability and helplessness. She looked down at Lily, and Marcus's blood ran cold. Don't, he said, taking a step forward. Don't you dare threaten my daughter. Rosa's eyes flashed with anger. I would never hurt a child, Mr. Hastings. What kind of monster do you think I am? I came here to care for your daughter, not to harm her. I came here because... She paused, her voice breaking slightly. Because I made a promise to Isabel. I promised I would find out what kind of man you were. And I promised that if you ever had children, I would make sure they didn't grow up without knowing love, the way Isabel's baby never got the chance to. Marcus stared at her, confusion mixing with the fear. What are you saying? I'm saying that Lily reminds me of what Isabel's baby might have been. I'm saying that when I hold her, I feel connected to my sister in a way I haven't felt in 23 years. I'm saying that caring for your daughter has been both the most painful and the most healing thing I've ever done. Tears were streaming down Rosa's face now, but her voice remained steady. I came here hating you, Mr. Hastings. I came here wanting to make you suffer. But then I saw you with Lily. I saw how lost you were, how broken. I saw a man who had everything and nothing at the same time. And I realized that you've been suffering all along. You've been punishing yourself more effectively than I ever could. Marcus felt his own tears beginning to fall. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry for what I did to Isabel. I was young and stupid and terrified, and I made the worst decision of my life. I've regretted it every single day since. I've never forgiven myself. I know, Rosa said softly. I can see it in your eyes. The guilt has been eating you alive. The night she died, Marcus said, his voice breaking, I was supposed to call her. She had left me 3 voicemails that day, saying she needed to talk to me, that it was important. But I was at a party celebrating my acceptance to Stanford. I was drunk and celebrating my future, and I deleted her messages without listening to them. And then the next morning, I found out she was dead. He sank down onto a stone bench beside the path, his head in his hands. For 23 years, I've wondered what she wanted to tell me. Was she scared? Was she asking for help? Was the baby okay? I'll never know because I was too selfish, too focused on my own life to care about hers. Rosa remained standing, watching him with an expression that was hard to read, part anger, part pity, part something else entirely. The fire wasn't your fault, she said finally. The investigation proved it was faulty wiring. The landlord was criminally negligent. You didn't kill Isabel, Marcus. But I killed her hope, Marcus said, looking up at her with red-rimmed eyes. I killed her faith in love and partnership in the future. She died heartbroken and alone because of me. That's almost worse than if I had set the fire myself. They sat in silence for several minutes, the only sound the gentle cooing of Lily in her stroller and the rustling of autumn leaves in the breeze. Finally, Rosa spoke. There's something else you need to know. Something I found out 6 months ago, after my mother died. Marcus looked up at her, dread pooling in his stomach. My mother kept a box of Isabel's things that she never let me see. She said it was too painful, that I should remember Isabel as she was in life, not in death. But after the funeral, I went through everything. And I found letters. Letters that Isabel had written but never sent. Rosa reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a worn envelope. She handed it to Marcus with trembling hands. This one was written the day before she died. Read it. Marcus took the envelope like it might burn him. His hands shook as he pulled out the folded paper inside. The handwriting was Isabel's. He recognized it immediately, that flowing, artistic script. Dear Marcus. I know you won't read this. You've made it clear that you want nothing to do with me or our baby. But I need to write this anyway, because I think it might be the last time I try to reach you. I'm not angry anymore. I was, for a while. I was furious and heartbroken and felt so betrayed. But carrying this baby has changed me. It's made me understand that love isn't about possession or obligation. It's about choice. And you chose not to love us, and that's your right. I want you to know that I'm okay. The baby is healthy. I've decided to name her Sophia if it's a girl, Elena if it's a boy. I've transferred to a different college program that will let me finish my degree while pregnant. My mother and sister are supporting me. I'm going to be fine. But I worry about you, Marcus. I worry that you'll spend your whole life running from things that scare you, building walls around your heart so high that you'll never let anyone in. I worry that you'll achieve everything you want professionally and realize too late that success without love is just an expensive prison. I hope you prove me wrong. I hope you find happiness. I hope you find someone who makes you want to be brave instead of safe. I forgive you. I don't know if that matters to you, but I need to say it. I forgive you for being scared. I forgive you for walking away. And I hope someday you'll forgive yourself. Take care of your heart, Marcus. It's more valuable than any empire you'll ever build. With love, always. Isabel. By the time Marcus finished reading, he was sobbing openly, his whole body shaking with the force of his grief. The letter fell from his hands and fluttered to the ground. She forgave me, he gasped out between sobs. She forgave me and I never knew. I've spent 23 years hating myself, and she had already forgiven me. Rosa bent down and picked up the letter, folding it carefully and placing it back in the envelope. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. My sister had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. She could forgive anything. But I'm not Isabel, Marcus. I don't forgive as easily as she did. Marcus looked up at her, his face ravaged by tears. What do you want from me, Rosa? Tell me what I can do to make this right. Anything. I'll do anything. Rosa was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant, as if she were seeing something beyond the garden, beyond the present moment. I want you to be the father to Lily that you never got to be to Sophia, she said finally. I want you to love her with the kind of love Isabel deserved. I want you to be present, engaged, vulnerable with her. I want you to break the cycle of emotional abandonment that seems to run through your life. I don't know how, Marcus admitted. I don't know how to be that kind of father. My own father was cold, distant. He taught me that emotions were weaknesses, that success meant sacrificing connection. I don't know any other way. Then learn, Rosa said firmly. For Lily. For Isabel. For yourself. Learn how to love without fear, how to be present without armor, how to build something that actually matters. She turned the stroller toward the house, preparing to take Lily inside. I'll stay, she said over her shoulder. I'll help you learn how to be a father. But you need to understand something, Marcus. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for that baby, who deserves better than to grow up with an emotionally absent father the way Isabel's baby never got to grow up at all. And I'm doing it for my sister, to honor her memory by making sure another child doesn't suffer from your inability to love. Thank you, Marcus whispered, but Rosa was already walking away, leaving him alone in the garden with his grief and the ghost of a love he had thrown away. 3 days after the garden confrontation, everything changed again. Marcus received a call from his head of security, a former FBI agent named Thomas Caldwell who handled all sensitive matters for Hastings Development Group. We have a situation, Thomas said without preamble. There's a journalist from the Pacific Coast Independent asking questions about you. Specifically, asking questions about your time at Coastal University and about a student named Isabel Morales who died in 2002. Marcus's blood turned to ice. What kind of questions? The dangerous kind. Questions about whether you knew her, whether you had a relationship with her, whether you were the father of her unborn child. He's also been digging into the fire investigation, talking to old witnesses, pulling police reports. Who is he? Name's Victor Chen. Mid-40s, investigative reporter, has a reputation for taking down powerful people. He specializes in stories about wealthy individuals with dark secrets in their past. Apparently, someone sent him a tip about you a few weeks ago. An anonymous source with what he's calling compelling evidence. Marcus closed his eyes. The anonymous emails. Someone was orchestrating this entire situation, turning private pain into public spectacle. Can we stop him? Not legally. First Amendment and all that. We can threaten lawsuits for defamation, but that usually just makes journalists dig harder. My recommendation? Get ahead of this. Control the narrative before he does. How? Tell your side of the story. Proactively. To a friendly outlet. Frame it as a tale of young love, tragic loss, and a man who's spent decades trying to atone. Marcus felt sick. You want me to turn Isabel's death into a PR opportunity? I want you to protect your reputation and your company. This journalist is going to publish his story whether you cooperate or not. The question is whether you're going to be portrayed as a villain or a complicated human being who made mistakes. Marcus hung up and sat in his study, staring at the walls. 23 years of careful distance from his past, and now it was about to be splashed across newspapers and websites for the world to consume. He needed to talk to Rosa. He found her in the nursery, changing Lily's diaper while humming that same lullaby. When she saw his face, she immediately knew something was wrong. What is it? There's a journalist investigating my past. Investigating Isabel's death. Someone sent him information about us, about the pregnancy. He's going to publish a story. Rosa's face paled, but she didn't seem surprised. I see. Did you contact him? Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice level. Are you the anonymous source? No, Rosa said firmly. I would never bring my sister's memory into the public eye like that. She deserves privacy, dignity. This isn't what I wanted. Then who? Rosa finished securing Lily's diaper and picked up the baby, holding her close. I don't know. But Marcus, you need to understand something. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually. Maybe this is meant to happen. Maybe it's time for you to stop hiding. I'm not hiding, Marcus protested. I'm protecting. You're protecting yourself, Rosa interrupted. You always have been. And maybe that worked for 2 decades, but it's not working anymore. Your past is catching up with you, and you need to decide how you're going to face it. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. It was Jennifer, his assistant, her voice tight with stress. Marcus, that journalist, Victor Chen, he's here. At the estate. At the front gate. Security is holding him, but he's demanding to speak with you. He says he has evidence of a cover-up related to Isabel Morales' death, and he's going to publish with or without your comment. Marcus felt the world tilting again. What evidence? What cover-up? I don't know, but he seems very confident. What do you want me to tell security? Marcus looked at Rosa, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. Let him in, Marcus said finally. I'll talk to him. The truth about the fire. Victor Chin was not what Marcus expected. Instead of the aggressive, tabloid-style reporter he'd imagined, Chin was soft-spoken, methodical, and disturbingly well-prepared. He sat in Marcus's study with a leather messenger bag full of documents, a digital recorder on the table between them, and an expression of calm professionalism. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, Mr. Hastings, Chin began. I know this is difficult. What do you want? Marcus asked bluntly. The truth. About your relationship with Isabel Morales. About the night she died. And about what really happened in the weeks leading up to the fire. The fire was ruled accidental. Faulty wiring. Was it? Chin pulled out a file and opened it. I've been investigating this story for 3 months, Mr. Hastings. And I've found some very interesting things. For example, did you know that the landlord who owned Isabel's building, Richard Voss, disappeared the same week you graduated from Coastal University and moved to start your MBA at Stanford? Marcus felt cold. No. I didn't know that. Did you know that Richard Voss had a history of insurance fraud? That he'd been suspected in 2 previous fires at properties he owned, both of which were heavily insured. I don't understand what this has to do with me. Chin pulled out another document. This is a bank statement from June 2002. It shows a wire transfer of $50,000 from an account registered to A. Price Consulting to an account owned by Richard Voss. The transfer was made 4 days before the fire that killed Isabel Morales. Marcus's world stopped. That's impossible. I didn't. The account was opened 3 weeks before the transfer and closed 2 days after the fire. The opening signature on file is yours, Mr. Hastings. Or rather, Adrian Price, as you were known then. This is a lie, Marcus said, his voice shaking. Someone forged that. I never paid anyone. I never had anything to do with that fire. Chen's expression remained neutral. That's what I'm trying to determine. Because there are 2 possibilities here. Either you paid Richard Voss to start a fire that would kill Isabel and solve your problem, or someone else used your identity to set you up. Lily Rose Hastings was 5.5 years old the first time her father told her about her sister Sophia. They were sitting in the garden of what used to be the Riverside Heights estate but was now the Isabel Morales Center for Young Artists, a residential program providing free housing, studio space, and support for struggling artists and single parents. Marcus still lived there, in a modest apartment on the 3rd floor. His fortune was mostly gone, distributed to causes and people who needed it more than he did. He worked as a consultant now, helping other developers transition to affordable housing projects. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. Rosa lived in the apartment next door. She had become the center's director, overseeing programs that helped hundreds of young artists and families every year. She had never married, never had children of her own, but she had Lily, and that was enough. Why did Sophia die? Lily asked, her young face serious. Because sometimes bad things happen to good people, Marcus said, pulling his daughter close. And because I made mistakes that hurt people I loved. But Sophia's memory helps us remember to be better, to be kinder, to be braver. Do I look like her? Lily asked. Marcus smiled, tears in his eyes. I think you look like yourself. But yes, I think you would have been beautiful sisters. Tell me about their mom. About Isabel. And so Marcus did, as he had done many times before and would do many times again. He told Lily about a woman who painted dreams, who sang lullabies, who forgave even when forgiveness seemed impossible. Rosa came out to the garden and sat beside them, adding her own memories, her own stories. Together, they kept Isabel alive in words and songs and the legacy of love that had finally, after so many years of pain, begun to heal them all. The lullaby drifted across the garden one more time, sung in Rose's voice, carried on Lily's innocent humming, a bridge between past and present, between grief and grace, between the person Marcus had been and the person he was finally learning to become. Duerme, mi amor, bajo las estrellas. Some debts, he had learned, could never be fully repaid. But they could be honored. They could be remembered. And in the remembering, in the transformation of grief into love, perhaps there was a kind of justice after all.